Hi, today we're starting to read The Littles Go Exploring. Tom and Lucy Little stood on the roof of the big house. They watched Cousin Dinky's glider climb high into the sky and disappear beyond the trees. A minute before they had seen Cousin Dinky's dinky room, Dan dropped a letter into the big chimney. This was the way the little family always got her mail. They had put a net across the chimney to keep the letters from falling into the fireplace below. The children ran to pick up the letter, but the net was empty. "Hey," said Tom. "There was a letter, wasn't there?" Tom, Lucy, Mr. Little, Mrs. Little, Baby Bessie, Granny, Uncle Pet, Uncle Nick. Lucy pointed. "Look, Tom," she said. "There's a hole in the net. The letter must have fallen through." "Wait," said Tom. "Look down there inside the chimney." Lucy Little lay flat on her stomach on the top of the chimney. She peered into the darkness below. "I see something white," she said. "Is that the letter?" "Where is it?" "It must be stuck on one of the bricks," said Tom. "I'm going to climb down there and get it." "Tom," said Lucy, "are you sure? You might fall into the fireplace and get hurt, or the pigs might see you." "What would happen to us then?" To be seen by the pigs would be the worst thing that could happen to Lucy and Tom and their whole family. That's because the Littles were tiny people. The biggest Little was just 6 inches tall. The Littles lived secretly inside the walls of the house owned by George Wee, Big and his family. There were 8 Littles in all. Tom, who was 10 years old, Lucy, who was 8, their parents, Mr. and Mrs. William T. Little, their baby sister, their grandmother, and their 2 uncles. There was plenty of room for everybody. In their comfortable 10-room apartment inside the walls of the big house. In most ways, the tiny Littles were like ordinary-sized people. Except for one thing. They had tails. The Littles thought their tails were handsome. And they thought big people looked very strange without tails. Maybe big people would think the Littles looked strange too, but no big person had ever seen a Little. The Littles wanted to keep it that way, and so did all the other tiny families who lived in houses in the big valley. They always stayed out of sight in their houses, and they hardly ever went out to visit each other. To keep in touch, they sent letters. Cousin Dinky Little Pilot delivered everyone's mail. He loved to travel up and down the big valley in his glider. He and his wife Della flew everywhere together, delivering the mail and having adventures. Tom and Lucy always looked forward to getting the mail. No letter had fallen down into the chimney. "I have got that letter," Tom said. And he started to go down. Suddenly he stopped. "Hey, Lucy," he said. "I never noticed it before, but those bricks are almost like steps. It's easy to climb them, kind of hot though." "Wait, Tom," said Lucy. "Lucy, I'm going with you." The tiny girl followed her brother into the chimney. It was dark and soddy. 5 feet down the steps came to a stop. The letter lay on the last step. Tom picked it up and sat down on the step. "Who's the letter from?" Lucy asked. Tom held the letter close to his eyes. He could just make out the writing in the dim light. "Oh, it's for you," said Tom. He handed his sister the letter. "From your best friend, Tina?" said Lucy. "Oh, God!" Tom leaned back against the chimney. "Hey!" he yelled. "What's wrong?" said Lucy. "What? It moved!" "What moved?" Tom jumped to his feet. "The brick I leaned against. It moved!" The boy began to push the brick. "Tom, be careful!" Lucy warned. "The chimney might fall down if there's a loose brick." "But look, it moves," said Tom. "See?" He pushed the brick. A tiny crack of light came from behind the brick. Tom pushed again. This time Lucy helped him. Light floated into the dark chimney. This is crazy, said Tom, almost whispering. He stuck his head through the opening. It's a room. A room, said Lucy. Oh, Tom, a secret room. The children walked into the tiny room. The light was coming through a little window, which was set into the far wall of the room. Tom and Lucy looked about them. They saw a small table and a chair in the room, just like the ones the Lil sat in their apartment. The table was covered with papers. Lucy ran to the window and looked out. There's the big yard, she said. But where are we, Tom? Where is the room? It must be behind the chimney in the attic, Tom said. Whose room is it? Said Lucy. Tom picked up some of the papers down from the table. He blew off some dust. It was used by a tiny person, that's for sure. But no one's been here for a long time, he said. Tom, said Lucy in her quietest voice, let's keep it a secret. Let's not tell anyone. It can be our secret room. Tom looked down at the yellow papers. He shook his head. We can't do that, he said. We'll have to tell Mother and Dad right away. Why? Asked Lucy. What did you find, Tom? These papers belong to Grandpa Little. That's why, answered Tom. This room, he must have come here and no one knew. Grandpa Little, said Lucy, but he disappeared a couple of years ago. Everyone says he's probably dead. Lucy sat down in the chair. Everyone except Granny Little, she went on. She thinks he's alive someplace, doesn't she? I think she does, but she never talks about him, didn't she, like Grandpa? There never was a clue, said Tom. Not one teeny clue about what happened to Grandpa when he disappeared. Tom looked at Lucy. Gee, maybe there's something in all these old papers that tells. He set up a bunch of papers. Look, here's some kind of diary and some maps. We have to tell Mother and Dad right away. But Lucy, we can't tell Granny. Why not? She's funny about the Grandpa. Dad will have to decide what to do. But why shouldn't she know? It's her husband. You just said Granny thinks Grandpa is still alive, said Tom. I'll bet she doesn't talk. She doesn't really, but she won't talk about him ever. Does that mean? Dad said that if someone you love just disappeared. That's worse than if he had died, Tom went on. You would hope he was alive, but you would think maybe he was dead. Just wondering about it would be helpful. Do you mean that's why she doesn't talk about it? Said Lucy. She doesn't want to think about it? Yeah, I suppose so, Tom answered. I guess that is it. You know, it bothers me too, said Lucy. That Grandpa just disappeared. Bye.